I consider the MacBook Pro 13 to be Apple's least risky computer, so it does not surprise me that they did not update it, redesign it, or anything when they released the M2 processor. I don't actually understand the MacBook Pro 13 anymore. The MacBook Pro 13 made a lot of sense when you needed a thermal system to cool off even low-end Intel processors, but as we've seen with the MacBook Air, you don't need a fan anymore. So what's the purpose of the MacBook Pro 13 when the MacBook Pro 14 exists? So you can see that we are going to get the new M2 chip that will support up to 20 hours of battery life. Okay, level up the M2. You can see that the M2 inside of here will be an 8-core CPU with the 10-core GPU. The thing about M2 is it looks like it's going to be much more graphically focused than the M1. So if you look at this like the iPhone processors, the A14 to the A15 was more about efficiency, and it looks like the M1 to the M2 is more about graphical power. So you can see here, 1.4 times faster than the M1 model, 6 times faster than the Intel processor, but that's not surprising. M2, 20 billion, it's really impressive stuff. Up to 24 gigabytes of unified memory. That still doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I know yesterday when I said divisible by 8, what I really meant to say is normally you want an equal amount of RAM per chip. And I know unified memory does not operate wholly like RAM, but normally when you're building a computer, you want what's called dual channel RAM. So you'll have the same stick type. So normally it's like 8, 16, 32. It's weird to see 24. 24 is normally not something you see when it comes to RAM or unified memory. I am excited to see how the 8-core CPU and 10-core GPU shake out. So it is built a lot like the M1, where you will get 4 efficiency cores and 4 performance cores, but both sets of cores have been drastically improved according to Apple. Now, where I'm really excited to see this is how does their single core performance improve? Because the M1 was already like an industry-leading single core performance chip that uses way less power, so seeing even more, 1.9 times faster performance compared to a 10-core PC laptop chip, and it uses 75% less power. That's crazy, and that's how they get this awesome battery life and stuff like that. You can see their little chart here. We already talked about the performance. The GPU, we're going to have to see really where it comes down to, because Apple can put the most powerful GPU in here that they can make, but it's still an integrated GPU, and not a lot of game developers, if you're a big gamer, not a lot of game developers take advantage of it. So yes, they're giving you more power, but unless you're a creative, using creative applications, there's not a lot that you can do with that power. Unless you play World of Warcraft, and you know, they are optimized for the Apple Silicon processors. M2, bring up, we talked about video editing performance. What do they mean when they say 1.4 times faster? What they're probably talking about is in the render speed, and render speeds, yes, they're impressive, but they're not that important. I mean, who's really, unless you're a daily vlogger, and who even daily vlogs anymore? Like the 1.4 times in the render, it's not gonna be as impressive as it was with the M1, where the M1 MacBook Pro 13 was able to do things like use H.265 better than full-on built-up desktop PCs like what I've got. Thermal efficiency, the MacBook Pro 13, unlike the MacBook Air, will still have an active cooling system, so it will still have fans built into it. That's really gonna be the only thing that you're gonna get from the MacBook Pro 13 over the MacBook Air. So I guess if you live in a very hot climate, you're always outside, you're always traveling in the heat, yes, I could see this then, but if you're gonna be working inside or you're an office worker, I don't really see it. Unified memory, much like the MacBook Air, will go up to 24 gigabytes of unified memory. Works well. Portable editing bay, 20 hours of battery life. That's still really impressive out of a 13-inch laptop. I don't think there's functionally that big of a difference between 18 from the MacBook Air and 20 in the MacBook Pro 13. Both of those are just wild and so much better than anything you can get outside of this huge honking MacBook Pro 16, which costs far more than either of these. Retina display, it doesn't look like they've updated the display here at all. They did update the display on the MacBook Air. The MacBook Pro 13 looks to be the exact same chassis, just with an updated processor. But you're still gonna get 500 nits of brightness, 25% more colors than sRGB. Camera and mic, did they put in the new? It says HD, but I'm not sure if they updated the camera or not, or if it's the same camera from last year. Magic Keyboard, we're still getting the Magic Keyboard with the Touch ID. Another thing that you get on the MacBook Pro 13 that you don't really get anywhere else is that touch bar. I know the touch bar is pretty divisive. Some people love it, some people hate it. I've never been a big fan of it. I prefer just having function keys. But if you really like touch bar, well, here you go. This is your only way that you can get it. Scissor mechanism, blah, 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 Touch ID, we're still getting it. Connectivity, I am not really thrilled with how the M2 MacBooks so far are shaking out with connectivity. It looks like all like the M standard processor, whether it's the M1 standard, the M2 standard, they've all got Thunderbolt 3. It's 2022. We've got the MacBook Pro 14 that has Thunderbolt 4. We've got everything's moving towards Thunderbolt 4. I really wish these computers had come with Thunderbolt. The data transfer speed and the charging speed between Thunderbolt 3 and Thunderbolt 4 is not that big of a difference. The difference is you get one external display with a MacBook Pro 13 or a MacBook Air, vice all of the additional ones that you can do with the MacBook Pro 14 or the MacBook Pro 16. If you're somebody that's looking to use this as a travel and home computer, that's really limiting. A lot of folks like having multiple displays, so it kind of sucks. All right, I think that's everything. They're showing you how to break it out. So let's view the pricing. Let's see what we can build here today. 13-inch MacBook Pro, you can see even the base model here comes with a 10-core GPU, unlike the MacBook Air that came with a lower-end GPU. So much like last year, the MacBook Pro 13 will always have the highest end version of the standard processor. The colors, space gray or silver, pretty boring, that midnight MacBook Air. We can go up to 24 gigabytes of unified memory. Again, it's kind of a weird number. We can go up to 2 terabytes of storage for $24.99. That is pretty expensive for a MacBook Pro 13 when the MacBook Pro 14 exists. And something else I'm not seeing here, it doesn't look like you get the option of having that really cool dual port charger that we see in the MacBook Air. I was kind of hoping that they would include that as an option in here too, so that kind of sucks. So that's the lowest end model. Let's see if there's any differences in this highest end base model. I don't understand why they even split these out. If there's no difference, it's just the, the configuration. In this version, yeah, you can't pick anything for the CPU. For the memory, you pick that, and then for that, you pick that. It's $24.99. Why? Okay, so it's the exact same computer. Why would you... I don't understand why they have the two different versions. Is there anything different here? No. It's just 512 gigabyte solid state drive versus the 256 gigabyte. They should just, Apple, if you're watching, just condense these. Just put one base model on here. You don't need 2 base models if there's no differences. So my recommendations for buying, this is gonna be the hard part where I don't really know how to recommend this or who to recommend this to. So if you're buying a small laptop just to be your travel portable work laptop, I would say get the MacBook Air for less money. And if you're looking to save the most amount of money as possible, get the M1 MacBook Air for far less and buy it refurbished for like, what, $600? Like that's where to go if you're trying to save the most amount of money. Then let's say you're trying to buy that hybrid computer of being both a home office and a travel computer. You'd probably need a little more RAM. So let's see here. Let's go up to 16 gigabytes of unified memory. You'd probably want a little bit more storage. Let's go up to 1 terabyte solid state drive. Now you're at $18.99, but why would you buy this when you can wait around for a refurbished 14-inch MacBook Pro for $17.99? That computer will have better ports, a better screen, a better processor, it'll have just better everything, and it'll cost less money. The only way I could recommend the MacBook Pro 13 is if you really want the touch bar and if you really want 20 hours of battery life in the smallest package possible. That's the only way I could recommend the MacBook Pro 13. And this hurts. My first ever MacBook was a MacBook Pro 13. I used that for years, and my wife still uses it. Like, I loved the MacBook Pro 13, but it has no place in today's market. And if you like this video, click here. This is the M2 MacBook Air. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.